Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. And Lord, we thank you that through your word you speak to us. Lord, we pray you'd speak to us now. Amen. Great. So as I start off, what I'd love to do is if you could just turn with the people around you, I just want you to think about this question. What things does the world worship? So think about just the world, people outside the church. What are the things that the world worships? Have a chat, 30 seconds. Okay, well, I hope you've had a few thoughts on that. The things I came up with, just a few off the top of my head, were things like money, possessions, success, status, education, sex and relationships. And I'm sure maybe you guys came up with similar ones, or maybe other ones as well. We could probably make a huge long list. But I guess the easiest way to work out what it is that you worship or people worship is to look at what are the things that most fill our thoughts, what are the things that consume our time, and what are the things that we put most of our energy into. And the reality is actually that those things, the Bible really calls them idols. They're little gods that we give our worship to, and everybody has them. So the theologian Karl Barth said, there is no man who does not have his own god or gods as the object of his highest desire and trust, or as the basis of his deepest loyalty and commitment. That's true, isn't it? Whether you're religious or not, everyone has these little gods. And because we worship these gods, they end up being at the center of our lives. Our life starts to revolve around them. And it could be all kinds of things, couldn't it? Maybe it's getting a nice house. Maybe it's getting married. Maybe it's wanting to be a parent. Maybe it's your children's education. Maybe it's getting a particular job or achieving the perfect body. Maybe it's earning a certain amount of money or getting that promotion. Whatever it is, the reality of our lives starts to revolve around that. They become the reality of our lives. They drive us. We live for these things and getting them. And for some of us, they are the things that get us out of bed in the morning. And last year I went to a big kind of spirituality fair, which we had a Christian stand at. And I met a lady there. And she sat down at the table, and I said, well, why have you come here today? And she says, well, I'm a very successful businesswoman, but I just don't feel I'm getting what I deserve in life. She said, I keep making lots of money, and then I hit this ceiling, and I can't push through it. And I make money, and then I kind of lose money, and then I make more money and stuff. And I said, okay, well, how bad are we talking here, when you lose your money? And she said, well, I had to sell my house in Kensington. And she said, so I had £300,000 in my pocket, but I had to move in with my boyfriend. And I thought, wow, yeah, it's got really tough for you, hasn't it, all of a sudden? And she said, my name is Beatrice. People call me the Queen Bee. I've always got whatever I wanted. I could always have any man and whatever it was. And I've never been so shocked in a conversation in my life. The brazenness of this person, just like a massive kind of exaggerated stereotype of someone who loves money. And for her, that's what she loved. Money was at the center of her life, and she worshipped it. It was the be-all and end-all. And the reality is, though, we're all like that if we're left unchecked. Maybe we wouldn't be quite so shameless about it, but we all do it, even if on a smaller scale. And actually, the things she worships drove her life. And I guess for others of us, though, those things don't drive us, they crush us. For some of us, those little gods are like chains around our neck. We're slaves to them. Even if we don't have the things we want, actually, they're always demanding of us, asking more. And actually, for some of us, it's what makes us not want to get out of bed in the morning. But the reality is we all worship little gods. And they sit on the throne of our lives. They demand our commitment. And they become the things at the center of our lives that we order everything around. Well, in Revelation, we've been looking at it over the last kind of few weeks. The churches in Revelation, they're under pressure to put other things at the center of their life. Revelation has been addressed initially here to the first century churches of the 7 cities. We've seen they've been threatened by false teaching. We read about the Nicolaitans. We see that they have faced persecution because we heard about the death of Antipas. And we see that they've been thinking about compromising with the surrounding culture regarding food sacrifice to idols and sexual immorality. And actually all those pressures are saying, worship something else. This teaching or ideology, that is more important than what you've got at the moment. Build your life on that. Your physical safety is more important than your faith in Christ. Social acceptance or your sexual fulfillment, that is the main thing. So make sure you put that first. And of course, they lived in the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire was under an emperor who would often have been considered divine, and people thought he should be worshipped as such. So John has addressed those churches in these first kind of 3 chapters, and then he has this vision here in chapter 4. And he says, doesn't he, "After this I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this.' At once I was in the Spirit." So when John says he was in the Spirit, I take that to mean that he wasn't kind of physically moved anywhere, but this is a spiritual experience he's having here. And the first voice he hears in Revelation is the voice of Jesus, and Jesus is calling him up. And we might say, well, up where? Well, we're told that there's a door open in heaven. But we need to think, what does that mean? What is John actually seeing here? Because the Bible uses the word heaven to mean a few different things. So the sky, where the birds kind of fly, that is referred to as heaven sometimes. Space, where the stars are, that is referred to as the heavens as well. But I think what he's referring to here is the third heaven that Paul mentions in 2 Corinthians. He's seeing into the place where God is. And that's where much of the remainder of Revelation kind of takes place. And as you look through the rest of Revelation, you'll see that this vision includes the present creation, it includes the church on earth, it includes people praying to God. And so it suggests that this isn't a vision of a kind of perfect heavenly place, like a heavenly paradise, but more likely what he's looking into is the heavenly places, the kind of heavenly realms that we get mentioned in Ephesians 6. You probably know the verse. "Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So I think what John is looking into here is a spiritual reality where the masks of good and evil are off, and both are revealed for what they really are. And so Revelation is a bit like looking into the war room at some kind of supreme headquarters during a war, with the kind of maps of the battlefield kind of denoting troop movements, and some of them represent what has happened, and some of them represent what will happen. It's not always clear which is which, but there's definitely all these things taking place. But right here in chapter 4, verses 1 to 11, really he's getting a view directly into the seat of power itself. This is like opening up the doors of number 10, or peering into the Oval Office, or maybe Buckingham Palace, but I guess Buckingham Palace isn't really a seat of power in the same way today. But here we get to see behind the curtain. And you think probably of the film The Wizard of Oz. You know, Dorothy makes her way, doesn't she, all the way to the Emerald City to see the wizard. And of course she's there, and there's the wizard, this great, incredible, powerful being. And then of course Toto the dog pulls back the curtain and reveals the reality that actually he's just a man speaking into a microphone, pulling some levers. He's a fraud. Well, here the curtain is being pulled back, but actually this isn't what we get. We're not seeing a God who is a fraud. It goes on, John, in verse 2. "There before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow shone like an emerald encircled around the throne." So John sees a throne. He sees the true seat of power. And I think he wants us to see the importance of the throne in this passage. You can do your own counts. I think it appears the word throne 13 times in this chapter, and then it goes on, I think, at least 5 times into chapter 5 as well. And so John wants to see the importance of this. So who is on the throne is the real question, though. Well, the answer is God, but John never actually names God himself. He simply calls him the one seated on the throne, or the one sitting on the throne. It's there in verse 2. It's there in verses 9 and 10. And so for John here, God is by definition, the one who is seated on the throne. I think that's what he wants us to see. And John describes what he sees. We get a lot of symbolic language here. I don't think we're supposed to take it particularly literally. We've already seen that when Jesus spoke to him, he said his voice was like a trumpet. And you'll see in chapter 5 next week, a lamb standing like one who was slain. And you think, how does that even work? How do you stand like one who has been slain? So there's a lot of symbolic language. But we're told that God's appearance was like that of precious stones. And we've got jasper and ruby mentioned here. And they're the first and last gems on the ephod of the priest. which represented the 12 tribes back in Exodus 28. And John wants us to connect us back to that God and say, this is the God. It's the God of the Exodus here who's on the throne. And really, that's pretty much the only description we get of God himself. The rest is a description of what's going on in the throne room. We have this rainbow, which is probably a symbolic reminder of God's commitment to humanity after the flood. Again, John is saying, who is this God? This is the same God of the flood. And then we're told about these other thrones in verse 4. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. So the question is, well, who are these figures around the throne? Well, I don't think they're angels. I think we're supposed to see that they're actually people. So back in chapter 2, verse 10, and in chapter 3, verses 5 and 21, those verses show us that it's God's people who are clothed in white and given crowns. So I think this is what we're seeing. We're seeing the people of God around the throne here. And we might wonder, well, why 24? Why 24 thrones? And there are lots of different ideas people have as to why that might be the case. I'm a big fan of letting the Bible interpret the Bible as much as possible. And so for me, the one I landed on was, for me, it was confirmed by Revelation 21, verses 12 to 14, which suggests really that the 24 is a combination of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. And together they represent the entirety of God's people, Jew and Gentile. And so I think what we're supposed to see here is these thrones represent the entirety of God's people in the presence of God, both Jew and Gentile. And then we're told, aren't we, from the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings and peals of thunder. In front of the throne, 7 lamps were blazing. These are the 7 spirits of God. Also in front of the throne, there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. So again, there's lots of language here which is reminiscent of Exodus and Mount Sinai with the mountain, with the thunder and the lightning and the rumbling. And I think John wants to see, this is a God who has great power. We read again about these 7 spirits. And I think that probably is just a reference to the Holy Spirit. Back in chapter 1, verse 4, we read about the Father and the Son and the 7 spirits. It's very Trinitarian language. So I think we're supposed to take the 7 spirits as the Holy Spirit. And then we read of this sea of glass, like crystal. And that's probably a reference to the sea of cast metal that was in Solomon's temple, a great big large metal basin full of water. And that was supposed to represent the forces of chaos subdued by the Lord. And that's a very common thought in Jewish thought, that the sea represents chaos. And so here with a glass sea, like crystal, calm, flat, I think John is saying, look, this is the God who is in control of all those things. And so this whole kind of image we're getting, it points us to the majesty and the glory and power of the one who is seated on the throne. And then we get these images, don't we, of these other beings, in the second half of verse 6 through to verse 8. And the image is very reminiscent of the visions that appear in Isaiah 6 and Ezekiel chapter 1, although there are differences in the beings that are described. But again, I think we're supposed to see there's symbolic language going on here. The creatures that we see around the throne, I think, are supposed to represent the created order directed in praise to God. So we've got 4 creatures. 4 is often used to refer to the world in the Bible, the 4 winds, the 4 corners of the earth, 4 points on a compass, and here the 4 creatures. And each of the creatures is really top of its own group, isn't it? We have the lion that is king of the jungle. We have an ox, which was the agricultural powerhouse of its day. The eagle being the most majestic of the birds. And then, of course, humanity there as the kind of crown of creation. And I wonder really whether this is there as a sort of illustration almost of what we read in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, where Paul says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made." So I think we're supposed to see, look, these beings represent God's eternal power and divine nature through what he has made. All of creation is gathered around the throne, focused on the throne, full of eyes, perhaps talking there about a focus on the throne. So I think that's what we're supposed to see. Creation is all centered around this throne as well. And creation, I believe, is shown with the 24 elders, with the people of God, because actually the cross isn't just about individuals being redeemed. It's about the whole of creation being redeemed as well. And then we see that These creatures, seemingly, they've taken a leaf out of the Chris Tomlin book of worship, as they never cease to sing the same two lines over and over again. Zing. And they're saying, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. So Lord God Almighty, I think again pointing us to who this God is, the God of power, who was and is to come. There's an eternal nature to this power there, sitting on the throne. And then we have verses 9 to 11. Whenever the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne and who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They lay their crowns before the throne and say, "You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created and have their being." So actually, as the creature, all of creation worships, the church responds as well in praise and worship. We're told that they cast their crowns down before the throne. And that's an expression of submission to God, that they are recognizing that any authority they have, that they've been given, comes through him, through the Lord. That actually he is a greater authority. And the title Lord and God possibly comes from language of the day that was used to describe the emperor. But of course what we see here is that whatever the emperor could claim, the claims here far outstrip that. The emperor might be able to claim power over the world, or at least the Roman world, but he can't claim to be the origin of the world. And so actually, it's God who's worthy to receive honor and glory and power by nature of who he is and what he's done. And so John really, he paints us a picture here of reality. As the curtain of reality is drawn back, we're confronted by the vision of the one who is seated on the throne. And we have this kind of series of concentric circles, all centering on the one who sits on the throne. And I think what John wants us to see here is that the God who is worthy of worship sits on the throne. So worship him. The God who's worthy of worship sits on the throne. Worship him. God is on the throne. The whole of creation is centered around him. All of creation was made by his will. He holds eternal power. He is the seat of all honor and glory and power. And this is the one who is worthy of our praise. And we ought to cast our crowns before no one else. So the question for us really is, well, who are we worshipping? Or what are we worshipping? Because we've already seen, as we thought at the beginning, that actually we do worship others and other things. We do cast our crowns before other things. We give our lives over to these little gods and we say, actually, no, you get to rule in my life. And we center our lives around them. And so there's a warning here, isn't there? There's a warning here for those of us who are driven by little gods. Because as the reality that God is on the throne is unveiled, we see how foolish that is. How foolish it is to center our lives on anything other than the one who is on the throne. Because actually when the curtain is drawn back and true reality is revealed, who is on the throne? Well, not those little gods. That lady who I met at that spirituality fair, as she was telling me, saying all these things to me about herself and her life, in my head I was going, am I about to say what I'm about to say? And I did. And I said, when she finished, I said, have you ever heard the parable of the rich fool? And I basically told her the parable of the rich fool about the guy who stores up all his wealth and then his life is taken from him and, he was rich in the world but wasn't rich towards God. And then what did he have? And I said, look, you can't take it with you. Basically, you are the fool in this. And actually, many of us will be like that. We will spend our whole life centered around something else, casting our crowns before something else. But then at the end of our lives, at the end of the race, what will it be like to discover that actually those things are not on the throne? Even those things are simply circling the throne as part of creation. So there's a warning here. There's a warning to the early church. Don't worship something else. Don't worship the false teaching. Don't worship your safety from persecution. Don't worship worldly affluence and compromise. See the big picture. The one who is worthy of worship is on the throne, so worship him, whatever that brings. And that's the same for us today. And so there's a warning there, but there's an encouragement for those of us who are crushed by these little gods. Because the reality is those gods are not on the throne. And they're not worthy of any glory or honor or power. So actually you can stop chasing after those things. There is one who is worthy of glory, honor, and power. And he is on the throne. So pursue him. And so for those of us who are driven by those little gods, this is a stark warning. But for those of us who are crushed by them, well, here there is hope and there is encouragement. So the question is, who or what are you worshipping? Who or what is sitting on the throne of your life? What are you centered around? People have sometimes summed up the whole book of Revelation with just 2 words. Jesus wins. And the ESV study guide, study Bible, really helpfully starts every book with a kind of explanation of some of the themes and ideas. And it says this about Revelation. I just thought it was so helpful. Revelation unveils the unseen spiritual war in which the church is engaged. The cosmic conflict between God and his Christ on the one hand, and Satan and his evil allies on the other. In this conflict, Jesus the Lamb has already won the decisive victory through his sacrificial death. But his church continues to be assaulted by the dragon in its death throes, through persecution, false teaching, and the allure of material affluence and cultural approval. So Jesus wins. Jesus has decisively won the war. He came to earth and he took on every enemy on the battlefield and he beat them. He came up against temptation and he beat it. He came up against sickness and he beat it. He came up against the forces of evil and he cast them out. He came up against the chaotic forces of nature and he calmed them with a word. And then on Good Friday, it looked like he'd been defeated. It looked like death had claimed him, the final enemy. But then 3 days later, he rose to life. Death couldn't hold him down. And he broke Satan's power. So Satan struck at his heel, but Christ delivered that killing blow to the head. And so the war is won. The war is won, but the defeated enemy is going to keep fighting battles to the end. Satan is in his death throes, but a creature that's in its death throes can still do a lot of damage. And if you get close enough, you can get mortally wounded. And that's what Satan wants. He wants to take as much of this world and as much of this church with him as possible. And so John says in this passage, and actually all through Revelation, see reality. Who's on the throne? God is on the throne. Jesus wins. The universe ultimately dances to the beat of God's drum. No one else is. So don't be a fool. Cast your crown before the one who is worthy, the one who is seated on the throne. No one else and nothing else. And so if this is true, and it is true, well, that should change our perspective on life. It should bring into focus what is truly important and change our priorities. And so I want you, with the people around you, just to finish, I want you just to talk about these 2 questions. How will your life look different if lived in the knowledge that God is on the throne? And I don't want your answer to be, well, I'll live for him. That's a really rubbish answer. I want you to be specific. How will this actually affect the way you live? You know, how will it affect the way you live at school or at work or in your family? How will it affect your singleness or your relationships? How will it affect your dreams and ambitions for your life? Maybe you've realized you're casting your crown in the wrong place. Or maybe you're trying to cast your crown before too many masters. And then that second one, name one way this passage will change the way you live tomorrow or this week. I was being generous with this week in case you've not got anything on tomorrow. But be specific. How will this actually change your life, knowing that the one who is worthy is seated on the throne, and that is the reality of this universe? I'll leave that with you.